August 28, 1945. Early morning mist. North of Oahu, Pacific Ocean. The sea is calm, too calm. Lieutenant Commander Steve G. Slater of Patrol Squadron 16 leans forward in his PB-4Y2 privateer's cockpit, squinting through the haze. A dark shape breaks the uniform surface of the ocean. At first, it looks like a whale's back. Then it keeps rising, higher, wider. Metal. A conning tower, but enormous, far larger than any Japanese submarine they'd ever encountered. The radio operator behind him whispers, almost involuntarily, "What the hell is that?" Spray peels off a bow the length of a destroyer's. Hatches slam open. Crews in faded Imperial uniforms rush out, hands raised. And then Slater sees it, something that makes his stomach drop. A cylindrical structure along the hull, too smooth, too big for a normal pressure casing. It looks like a hangar for a plane on a submarine. The privateer circles lower. You could hear a pin drop inside the aircraft as the crew stares through the windows, trying to make sense of what they're seeing. The war is over. Japan has surrendered, and yet here, rising from the deep like something out of science fiction, is a machine designed for an entirely different kind of war. Slater clicks the intercom, his voice low. "Boys, command's never going to believe this." Below them, the giant I-400, the largest submarine the world had ever seen, rolls gently in the morning swell, its crew waiting, its secrets still sealed inside its steel walls. And deep within that hull lies something no Allied commander thought Japan ever had the capability to build. The kind of secret that could have changed everything. The boarding team approaches cautiously, rifles slung but ready. The ocean laps against the long, curving hull of the I-400, as if unsure how to touch something that shouldn't exist. Ensign William Bill Howell is the first to climb the rope ladder, boots clanging against steel still warm from its ascent. The Japanese officers wait stiffly on deck, their faces exhausted but proud. Even in surrender, they stand like men guarding a legacy. Howell's breath catches when he reaches the top. He's standing on a submarine deck that feels like the roof of a warehouse. A massive cylindrical bulge runs nearly the entire length of the ship, smooth, reinforced, seamless. Not a torpedo tube, not ballast, something else, something unprecedented. One of the Japanese officers breaks the silence. His English is halting but steady. "Inside, you will find aircraft." Howell turns sharply. "Aircraft, plural?" The officer nods once. A petty officer swings open a hatch that blends perfectly into the hull. Howell ducks inside and stops dead in place. The air smells like machine oil and salt. A single overhead bulb flickers to life. And there, in the center of the long tubular bay, sits a folded ring float plane, sleek, predatory, Aichi M6A1 Seiran, a purpose-built attack aircraft designed to be launched from a submarine thousands of miles from home. The wings are folded tight, propeller locked, every surface engineered to snap into fighting configuration in minutes. Howell takes a slow step toward it. "You've got to be kidding me." He walks the length of the hangar, boots echoing. Behind the first Seiran sits another, and behind that, space for a third. A submarine that could carry 3 bomber recon aircraft, a vessel meant to cross the Pacific in silence and strike like a ghost. This isn't a submarine, it's a mobile airbase, an underwater aircraft carrier. And none of the Allies had even suspected it existed. Howell whispers to himself, barely audible, if they'd actually launched these. But what were they meant to launch against, and how close had Japan come to using them? The deeper the American search, the clearer it becomes. This machine wasn't designed for defense. It was built for something bold, unthinkably bold.
Inside the control room, still littered with logbooks, charts, and navigation tools, abandoned in haste, the story begins to reveal itself. Lieutenant Commander Tatsunosuke Ariizumi, the submarine's captain, had commanded this steel leviathan with a singular purpose: to strike the American homeland in a way no one expected. Howell flips open a waterproof folder strapped beside the chart table. Neatly drawn flight routes stretch across the Pacific, reaching places no Japanese aircraft could normally touch. One route is circled heavily in red pencil. A name appears above it, a target: the Panama Canal. You can almost hear the gears turning as Howell imagines the plan. The I-400 class would surface in the dead of night. The hangar doors would swing open. The crew would winch the catapult onto the deck. In minutes, the folded Ceran bombers would become full aircraft, engines snarling to life. They'd take off into the darkness, flying low over the water, then arc toward the canal locks, those precious structures that allowed the U.S. Navy to move whole fleets between oceans. Destroy the locks, and suddenly America's naval might becomes a one-ocean force. One submarine, 3 bombers, an attack no one could see coming. But the documents show something even chilling, a revised plan, scrawled in darker ink, likely Ariizumi's own hand. A second mission. Closer to home, more desperate. A strike on the American Pacific Fleet at Ulithi Atoll. A fleet anchorage packed with carriers, battleships, and supply vessels. One successful raid could have set the Pacific ablaze again, late in the war, when the world was expecting Japan to surrender. But as Howell scans the pages, he notices sudden crossing outs. Notes changed, dates shifted. Orders received, then canceled. New orders coming in from Tokyo as the empire crumbled. Ariizumi never got the green light. Not for Panama, not for Ulithi. The largest submarines ever built had sailed thousands of miles for a mission that dissolved before their eyes. A mission that, if carried out just months earlier, might have altered the course of the Pacific War itself. Howell closes the folder slowly, because now he sees the real question, the one no one on the American side had even thought to ask. If one I-400 is here, where are the others? The Americans had expected a curiosity. They hadn't expected a class. As the I-400 is towed toward Pearl Harbor under guard, U.S. intelligence scrambles. Reports filter in from across the Pacific, sub-sightings, intercepted messages, fragments of chatter from surrendered Japanese bases. Bit by bit, a picture forms. Japan hadn't built one submarine carrier. They had built 3. The I-400, the I-401, and the smaller but still formidable I-13 and I-14, capable of carrying reconnaissance float planes. A hidden squadron, an underwater strike force, and they had all slipped out of Japan before the capitulation. Admiral Nimitz receives the decrypted summary with a rare expression of disbelief. He knew the Japanese were inventive. He knew they were desperate. But this was a weapon from a war that hadn't happened yet. A new order goes out. Locate the remaining ships, intact, at all costs. Days later, the submarine USS Segundo makes radar contact with a massive silhouette gliding just below the surface. When they surface to investigate, the Leviathan rises to meet them. The I-401 breaks through the waves like some prehistoric creature forced back into the light. Her crew lines the deck quietly, their faces drawn, eyes unreadable. They know what's happening. They know the war is lost, and yet they carry themselves with the solemn dignity of men who built something extraordinary, even if it came too late. A boarding party moves in, and once again the hangar doors reveal another folded set of Ceran aircraft, immaculate, armed, ready. Tools are still laid out as if the deck crew were preparing them moments before. But there is something else, something far more unsettling. A log entry dated only weeks earlier, a departure time, coordinates for a launch point, and beneath them, Ulithi Operation Standby. The mission was never cancelled, only delayed. The I-401 had been heading for her attack position when the surrender order reached her. Ariizumi's sister vessel had been mere days, perhaps hours, from surfacing in the middle of the night, launching her bombers into the heart of the Pacific Fleet. The Americans stare at the log in silence. How close had it come? How thin was the line between victory and catastrophe? How many more secrets were still hidden in these steel giants?
The more the Americans learned, the more uncomfortable the truth became. These submarines weren't relics. They were prototypes, decades ahead of anything the U.S. Navy had even imagined. Inside a locked compartment on I-401, engineers find hydraulic schematics for rapid aircraft assembly, pressure-proof fuel storage systems, and a launch catapult unlike anything in Allied inventories. Some of the mechanisms are so novel that U.S. officers argue over how they even function. By the time the I-400 and I-401 reach Pearl Harbor, Navy engineers swarm them like archaeologists uncovering a lost civilization. They sketch, they photograph, they measure. Every rivet is logged, every piece of machinery is dissected. But there's a problem, one so big it immediately overshadows the excitement. The Soviets. Under the terms of post-war agreements, the U.S. must share major captured technologies with Moscow. And the Navy knows. If Stalin gets his hands on these submarines, this blueprint for long-range, covert precision strikes, the balance of post-war power could shift overnight. So a new directive is whispered through classified channels. The submarines must disappear entirely. No press statements, no museum plans, no international inspections. Just silence. On a gray morning in 1946, a small group of American officers stands on the deck of the USS Trumpetfish, watching the hulking shapes of the I-400 and I-401 ride low in the water. Charges are set, final photographs are taken, not for history, only for internal files. Moments later, thunder rolls across the surface. The massive steel giants shudder, tilt, and begin their slow, heavy descent into the abyss. Water rushes over their decks, the hangars vanish, the conning towers disappear beneath a cascade of bubbles. And then, nothing. Just the empty Pacific, as if they never existed. For decades, the world would forget these underwater aircraft carriers, these machines so advanced they felt like science fiction. Japan had built them in desperation, the US had buried them in secrecy. It wasn't until the early 2000s that researchers accidentally discovered them again, resting silently on the seabed, their secrets long surrendered to the deep. But for a brief moment in 1945, humanity had stood face to face with a weapon from the future. A weapon that might have changed the war if it had appeared just a little sooner.